going back to Mr. Zuckerberg's testimony, his argument was that this category or demographic is a small part of the Instagram business. Does your research support that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is a little bit murkier than that, right? I mean, I do think he maybe has some points when he says they're not a demographic that is majorly monetized and that they maybe don't bring in a ton of ad revenue. But that does not mean they're not significant. I mean, when you look at our eMarketer data, we see that in the U.S. at least, about 11% of Instagram users are under the age of 18. And so, again, not a huge majority, but that's a significant percentage. And also, I think, the numbers tell one story, but the reality is these platforms gain a lot by, essentially hooking these users young, because the younger that they get on these platforms, the more likely they are to continue using them in the future. So again, you can look at the numbers, you can look at maybe how much revenue they're generating from teens per year, but really it's about setting these behaviors early and benefiting in the long term.
Mr. Zuckerberg stated that teens equate to 1% of revenue, which I thought was an interesting data point. This question about the future of Instagram in particular, but the other Meta family of apps is, well, what would they change? And part of the discussion in the testimony was the tension on the rules they have in place and the privacy of the individuals that are signing up for them. Does that tension have any bearing on how they do business going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's still really early to say, but I mean, for sure, I think depending on how these lawsuits play out, if they end up having to fundamentally change how their platforms work, whether it's the algorithms or autoplay, infinite scroll, whatever it might be, that will in turn have an impact on how teenagers use these platforms. And something we've noticed is that, it was interesting to see him really kind of downplay to what extent Meta has really prioritized time spent as a metric, when our numbers show, and just, paying attention to the company in general, we know that time spent is definitely a crucial metric for Meta and all social networks. And we have seen time spent among teenagers specifically rise year over year on Instagram. And so we do see that, anything that would kind of chip away at that time spent, right, if they would have to make changes to the platform, would have an impact.
But your research shows that teens are spending significantly more time on TikTok than on Instagram. Mm-hmm. I think I'm correct in saying right. I just want to point out that with this trial, TikTok and also Snap are not parties to the case because they had settlements prior to it. But if we look bigger picture at the industry, how will these other players be looking at this trial, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're all probably looking at it through a similar lens. I know YouTube is trying to really make the case that it operates very differently than a Meta, than a TikTok, than a Snapchat, and so I think that could potentially see YouTube play out a little bit differently. But I think in general, yes, especially a company like TikTok, which is kind of it's really equated with teenage use, right? A large part of why it became so popular in the U.S. in the first place was because of young people, because of teenagers. So, and like, as you said, yes, our figures do show that teenagers spend a ton of time on TikTok, definitely more than Instagram, although we are seeing that time spent, come down a little bit year over year, which kind of suggests that TikTok isn't maybe the shiny new object it was, 5-6 years ago.
The difficult question, Minda, is what happens next, right? And your research, others point to lawmakers, putting out a new set of rules. Is there momentum behind that pathway?
So yes and no. I think there is momentum at the state and the federal level. We are seeing lawmakers and regulators try to address a lot of these concerns, independent of this lawsuit. These lawsuits. That being said, they're running up against a lot of challenges. For one is big tech lobbying. I mean, these companies are lobbying against a lot of these bills and laws. There's challenges happening in court, and then even generally this tends to be a bipartisan issue. I mean, we see lawmakers on both sides of the aisle want to kind of rein in the power of these platforms and rein in what they perceive to be harms, but the way they want to go about it often differs, and so that's another challenge. Enforcement is a challenge. We're seeing that play out in Australia with the ban under 16s. They're having a lot of success in some ways, but they are having some enforcement challenges and actually getting people under 16 to completely stay off these platforms. And so it's a messy area to regulate.